Yucatan, Mexico. Land of the jaguar. Land of the cenotes. Land of the Maya. This is a story of a wonder of the world as you have never seen it before. Join me in this journey and discover the secrets that the architecture of this ancient city keeps. What's inside the pyramid of Kukulkan? How does a feathered serpent grow? What were the human sacrifices like that the Mayans offered in the sacred cenote? What did Chichen Itza look like? This city, located in a valley in the peninsula of Yucatan that was still used as a pilgrimage center when the Spanish first arrived, saw its golden age between the 9th and 12th centuries AD. Unlike Teotihuacan and other cities in central Mexico, Mayan cities were not formally planned, and they expanded organically. Most Mayan cities showed a tendency to grow outward from the center and upward as new structures were built on top of the previous ones. The idea of pyramid was born as a need to rise and see above the enormous sea of jungle that exists in this area. However, over time the pyramid became an object of worship and rituals, part of the worldview of the Maya. Today, buildings have a gray appearance due to the stone they are made of. However, back in the day they were covered in bright colors. Red was the color for temples, pyramids, and religious buildings. But yellow, green, black, and especially white were also used for civic buildings. Blue was the color of the gods. In human sacrifices, Mayans covered the victims with this color. The blue pigment was very easy to make, since it was obtained from the indigo flower, a copious plant in the region, and it really impressed Europeans who obtained their pigment from lapis lazuli, an extremely rare and difficult mineral to work with, which is why the blue pigment was used very little in European paintings of that time, while in New Spain it was very abundant. We begin the tour of Chichen Itza in the Great North Platform, probably the oldest part of the city, which forms an important relationship between its buildings. Mayans did not let trees grow in the important areas of their cities, since we're in the middle of an immense jungle where nature is aggressive and can gradually destroy architecture. Upon entering the precinct, the first building we find is a great ball court. The ball game was a sport that was played by the pre-Columbian peoples of Mesoamerica. The rules of the game are not known precisely, but it is known that it had an important religious connotation and that the players were sacrificed. The Great Ball Court of Chichen Itza is the largest court in Mesoamerica, measuring 120 meters per 30 meters. Although the most important thing for the game was not the size of the court, but its shape. The shape of the court was so important that it remained the same for hundreds of years. This basic form consisted of masonry walls defining a rectangular playing enclosure, ending in a goal on either side of its axis. The plan resembles a capital letter I. The lateral structures enclosing the precinct often incorporated a sloping bank, creating surfaces from which the rubber ball could bounce or roll. In some cases, other structures shared the ball court walls. In the case of a great ball court at Chichen Itza, the North Temple uses part of the end wall of the court as its platform, allowing the elite privileged views of the court. The goals are made of 2 stone rings with images of intertwined feathered serpents, into which the players try to score by hitting the ball with their bones, that is, with their elbows, hips, and knees. Below, the sloped banks have reliefs of scenes of player sacrifices. It is likely that the scenes depicted refer to mythological or historical events related to the rulers of Chichen Itza. At the back of the side walls, there are steps that allow the spectators to climb to the top to watch the game. Over the eastern side is the Temple of Jaguars and Shields. In its upper level, 2 columns in the shape of feathered serpents support a temple. This temple has rooms at different levels, and in its interior walls it has vivid images of processions and battle scenes of the history of Chichen Itza. In the lower room there is a throne in the shape of a jaguar. Next to the Great Ball Court is the Tzompantli, a platform completely surrounded by friezes with reliefs of skulls, which reveal the function that this building had. The red color that originally covered the surface of the platform can still be distinguished in some places. This construction consisted of exhibiting the skulls of enemies and sacrificed prisoners. We know the function of this type of building because some of these were still in use in various parts of Mexico at the arrival of the Spanish. The skulls here were shown pierced vertically, one on top of the other. The purpose of this impressive tradition was to commemorate the great acts of war as well as to frighten the neighbors and possible rebellious subjects. A few meters from the Tzompantli is the platform of eagles and jaguars. It is rectangular with 4 sets of steps, and it bears a close resemblance to other platforms located in the central axis of the squares that form the great city, such as the platform of Venus, which is located right in the center of the precinct. All of these platforms probably served as podiums for different rites. On the balustrades there are ascending feathered serpents, and on the panels there are representations of eagles and jaguars holding hearts. The platform of Venus is square, with stairways on all 4 sides and balustrades ending in serpent heads. The decorated friezes show bodies of feathered serpents among fish. There are representations of mythical creatures, a blend of jaguar, eagle, and snake with some human features that have been interpreted as representing the planet Venus. The platform of Venus is closely related to the pyramid and to the path to the sacred cenote. The Temple of Kukulkan is the largest construction that dominates the city of Chichen Itza with a height of 30 meters. It has low ornamentation other than the huge feathered serpents on the balustrades and on the columns at the top. From them, the temple receives the name of Kukulkan, which means feathered serpent in the Mayan language. Its shape is very interesting because it has a perfectly square plan and a staircase on each of its 4 sides, something not very common in Mexican pyramids that are normally frontal and have a single staircase on their main side. Therefore, the shape of a pyramid forces you to move around it. It forces you to walk and observe it from different points of view. This configuration is due to its location in the middle of a square. Like platforms, it is an architectural object placed in the middle of an urban area. Therefore, it is perfectly symmetrical from wherever it's observed. So even though it's not too tall, it's not huge. It's very imposing, and the sky feels really, really close to you because architecture from Mesoamerica has a play with the horizons and with the perspective of the horizon. So you can see how imposing this thing is and how close the sky is. The Temple of Kukulkan, also known as El Castillo, the castle in Spanish, demonstrates the advanced knowledge of astronomy, geometry, mathematics, and acoustics that the Mayans possessed. To understand the facade of this building, we need to know the Mayan calendar. Being an agricultural society, for the Mayans the seasons of the year were important, so a solar calendar called Hab was used, achieved with a close observation of the path of the sun and the stars. The Hab is made up of 18 months of 20 days each, and 5 additional days considered as inauspicious days, in which it was better not to get up because evil spirits were around. This way, a year of the Mayan calendar is made up of 365 days. The Mayan calendar was so exact that it had the same number of days as the Roman calendar that we use today. The Temple of Kukulkan has 4 stairways, each with 91 steps. This adds up to 364, and if this small platform at the base of the temple is considered, it adds up to 365, which represent the days in the Hab. In addition to the Hab, the Mayans used a second calendar called Tolkin that represented a sacred cycle of 260 days. Both calendars were merged in this calendar round, in which the combination of both gives rise to 18,980 unique days, equivalent to 52 years, which means that every 52 cycles of the Hab calendar, the combination of both calendars begins to repeat itself, and it was considered as the equivalent of a new century. The numbers 18, 20, 5, and 52 can be deciphered in the Pyramid of Kukulkan. The temple has 9 bases. If any of the facades is viewed from the front, by having the staircase in the center, the number of bases can be multiplied by 2, resulting in the number 18, corresponding to the 18 months that the Hab contains. In the upper temple, there were 5 crenels on each facade. These represent the 5 inauspicious days of the year. and if you add them all up, you get 20 as a result, which are the days each month has. In the riser of each base, you can see 3 panels in bas-relief. If you add them all up, you get a total of 26, which when added to the 26 on the opposite side of the stairway gives you 52, which represents the 52 cycles of the Hab in the calendar round. Every year, a spectacular phenomenon occurs in this pyramid. As you can see, the buildings in the complex are not aligned with the cardinal points, but are tilted about 20 degrees from the north. This causes that at sunset of each equinox, the sun projects a spectacular play of light and shadow. This is a pyramid of Kukulkan, and right here, in this very spot is where once a year, when the sun is in the zenith, in the highest part, so this is where the tail of the snake grows, and it's projected by the sun. Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, was a divinity present in the mythology of many of the pre-Columbian peoples of Mesoamerica. On the equinoxes of March and September, the phenomenon can be seen in all its splendor when the sun hits the 9 bases, and these in turn cast their shadow on the balustrade in the shape of the body of the serpent, which seems to descend from the temple with direction to the sacred cenote. So today is not the equinox, but we're pretty close to it. And so you can kind of see right there how the body of the snake is projected. You can kind of see it right now because we're not quite in the date, but you can see how it grows and is projected by the sun all the way to the top. It is impressive that they were able to achieve this effect almost 1,000 years ago only with the observation of the solar path. Due to the fact that the eastern and southern facades of a pyramid are deteriorated, no phenomenon of light and shadow is observed. However, it is likely that if the stairs and the balustrades were restored, an effect that evoked the ascent of the serpent to the pyramid could be appreciated. Therefore, the pyramid is not only a building to perform Mayan rituals, but it is also an instrument to observe the count of time and to mark the solstices and equinoxes, which are important dates for agricultural cycles because the seasons change in those days of the year. The word equinox comes from Latin aequinoctium, and this from aequus, equal, and nox, night, and it is the moment when the sun is over the equator, making the night of equal duration as the day. There's another curious phenomenon that occurs in these buildings, and that is when you clap in front of the temple, an acoustic effect is produced. I will demonstrate. A noise is produced that is very similar to the singing of the Quetzal, the sacred bird of the Mayans. So this sound is created because of the position that these buildings have with each other. It's right in front of it. And because of the shape of the stairs and because of the shape of the pyramid. Typically, Mayan temples are made up of 3 parts: platform, pyramid, and sanctuary. The sanctuary has a flat stone roof supported by corbel vaults, and inside there are 3 rooms dedicated to important deities. In other pre-Columbian cities, the upper temple of the pyramids is rarely preserved. This is because they use a structure with perishable materials, such as wooden beams, but in Chichen Itza, this is not the case. Here, the ceilings were supported by corbel vaults, a construction method invented by the Mayans where the stones get closer in each row. Stone, being a resistant material, has endured, and thanks to that, the upper temple of this pyramid is still standing after about 1,000 years. The Temple of Kukulkan contains inside another temple from an earlier time known as the Temple of the Red Jaguar because of the sculpture inside. This temple is also made up of a platform, a pyramid, and a sanctuary. Sometimes when a calendarical cycle was completed, that is 52 years, the Mayans built a new temple on top of the previous one. Therefore, under the interior pyramid, there is an even older temple. All 3 are oriented in the same direction and everything is built on top of a cenote. The Temple of the Red Jaguar was an important discovery as it contains a sculpture of a chacmol and a jaguar throne. The chacmol still has its shell teeth, eyes, and nails. and the jaguar throne has its jade-encrusted eyes and spots at its white-painted stone teeth. And just so that you get a general idea of the site, we have this platform here. We have over there is the ball game that we saw before. Here we have the pyramid of Kukulkan, and over there the temple of the knights. In the eastern part of the enclosure is the Temple of the Warriors, which owes its name to the dozens of pillars with reliefs of warriors and prisoners with their hands tied. The wide spaces covered by the colonnades, once covered with corbel vaults, allowed the presence of a large number of people during important events. The many men represented on the pillars, armed and in a ceremonial clothing, has given the building its name. Several of them contain iconographic elements next to their heads, which must represent the names of characters, personal attributes, or titles. The upper temple has an entrance divided into 3 parts by serpent columns, preceded by a chakmol, a statue used as a sacrificial stone and as an altar, where human hearts and other objects were placed as offerings to the gods. The walls and the corners of the outside of the temple show long-nosed masks and man-bird snakes with remains of their original polychromy. The interior of the temple had 8 rooms separated by an interior wall with an altar table supported by a small atlas. Next to the Temple of the Warriors is the so-called Temple of the Large Tables, a pyramidal structure with 4 bases that support a higher temple. Inside had a long altar made up of rectangular stone slabs, supported by small atlas with raised arms. In the upper frieze of the exterior walls there was a procession of jaguars made in bright colors. Right next to this temple there is a hypostyle hall that was closely related to the temple. To the south of these temples is the longest colonnade on the site, known as the West Colonnade. Originally covered with corbel vaults, its main facade looks toward the Great North Platform, but it has a corridor that connects this square with the Plaza of the Thousand Columns behind it. It must have been built to accommodate the large crowds that congregated during festivities, gatherings, and commercial exchanges. When going through the corridor in the middle, you reach the Plaza of the Thousand Columns, which is a wide space delimited by colonnades on a large base. Corbel vaults were supported by these colonnades and generated enormous interior spaces. However, today, only the columns remain. Some of its buildings were 2-story buildings, and it's likely that their function was civic-religious, although it is possible to think of a commercial or residential use. The columns are as dense as those in an Egyptian hypostyle hall. The so-called Northeast Colonnade, a hypostyle hall with an altar at the end, is characterized by having a rejollada to its north, which is a deep natural cavity in the water that contained the rainwater that drained from the plaza. The eastern side of the square is made up of several buildings whose use is not very well known. However, it is thought that their use must have been closely linked to what happened in the plaza, since you can see their interior from the center of the precinct. These buildings from left to right are the Palace of Balam Kawilaau, the Palace of the Sculptured Columns, the Temple of the Small Tables, and the Southeast Colonnade. In the southern part of the square is the market, which is the best and largest example of the courtyard gallery structures. Its gallery is related to the events of the square, but inside it there's a courtyard with tall columns that carried a roof of perishable material, sloping towards the sunken courtyard, and the rainwater was drained through a stone channel. The altars in the platform complete its equipment. Around the Plaza of the Thousand Columns there are 3 small ball game courts. This sport was practiced both in daily life and in religious celebrations, so there was a need to have multiple courts in the city. Like I said, the platform of Venus in the Great North Platform has an important relationship with the pyramid of Kukulkan, as these structures form an axis with the sacred cenote, which is located in the north. An artificial road called Sacbé communicates the great precinct of the pyramid with the sacred cenote. The Sacbé is 270 meters long, and its sides are slopes covered with carved stone. The processions departed from the castillo towards the sacred cenote, where the ritual cleansing of those to be sacrificed and of the priests would be performed by means of a steam bath. A cenote is a natural well, formed over thousands of years by the collapse of the Earth's bedrock. In the peninsula of Yucatan, there are more than 6,000 cenotes. If you locate all of them in a map, you will see that they form a ring. They were formed thanks to a meteorite that fell on the Yucatan coast millions of years ago, associated with the extinction of the dinosaurs. This phenomenon and several subsequent geological processes caused the formation of the ring of cenotes, some of the most beautiful sights on the planet. In the Yucatan Peninsula, there are almost no rivers and there are very few lakes, usually with marshy water. The only source of drinking water are the cenotes, so the Mayans formed their cities around them since they contain fresh and clear water. The Mayans also used the cenotes as pilgrimage centers. There they made human sacrifices that they sent to the gods as messengers, since the cenote was considered one of the main entrances to the underworld, where many of the gods were. This is also the reason why the pyramid of Kukulkan was built over a cenote, because the cenote represents the underworld. The lower part of the pyramid represents the earth, and the upper part represents the heavens. The sacred cenote of Chichen Itza has a diameter of 60 meters. The water level is 22 meters from the edge and its depth ranges between 6 and 12 meters. The explorations carried out in its waters have discovered pieces and fragments of gold, copper, obsidian, shell, copal, among other materials, as well as bone remains of children and adults. The name Chichen Itza in the Mayan language means mouth of the well of the Itzá, referring to the sacred cenote and the Itzá, powerful mythical historical lords of the city during the time of its growth and peak. There is a second large cenote in the center of Chichen Itza called Cholok, next to which is a temple with the same name. Probably its function was religious worship, with ceremonies linked to the cenote. The entrance of the temple is oriented towards the Sacbé that connects it with the Plaza of the Thousand Columns, the Plaza of the Ossuary, and with the Caracol. The Plaza of the Ossuary is made up of 5 constructions. We first have the platform of the tombs, which had a funerary use. Its columns that rise from a platform supported a roof. Then we have another platform of Venus, very similar to the one in the Great North platform with a flat surface, 4-axis steps, and the reliefs of the man-bird serpent that adorn the building. Then there is the round platform, which is one of the few examples of that form at Chichen Itza. And finally, the ossuary, also known as the tomb of the high priest. This square pyramid also has a staircase on all 4 sides, and all its balustrades finish off the base with serpent heads, and they have their intertwined body in bas-relief. The blue-floored interior had altar tables carried by Atlas, very similar to these in the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. The alignment ossuary, platforms, Sacbé, Cenote Xolok, from west to east, repeats the arrangement observed in the Great North platform with the Castillo, platform of Venus, Sacbé, Sacred Cenote from south to north. It is a type of regularity in the architectural distribution of the city. A few meters from the group of the ossuary is the House of the Metates, which forms a set of rooms with large porticos connected to each other. They were probably a residence for people related to the ceremonial use of the architectural complex of the ossuary and its maintenance. South of the Ossuary Complex is the Casa Colorada, Spanish for red house. Its name comes from the remains of red paint inside. This temple must have had a religious and a public function because of the ball court that is attached to the back of the building. It forms a complex and a square with the Casa del Venado, the deer house, which is a very similar building, although today it is in ruins. A few meters further south, we come to one of the most important squares, the Plaza of the Caracol. The name is due to the spiral staircase located inside of this building, since caracol is the Spanish word for snail and for spiral staircase. It is also known as the observatory due to its function. It preserves a round tower and several square elements aligned with notable differences. The windows and openings are aligned with events in the night sky that made possible close observation of the planets and stars, the movement of Venus, and the sunset on key dates. Temple of the Panels is located on the eastern side of the square, on a high base with a colonnade in the front, just like the Temple of the Warriors. It owes its name to the north and south panels of the colonnade, which shows scenes with men, animals, and plants. The offerings rescued during its exploration belong to fire ceremonies that were celebrated inside the temple. Finally, we have the complex of the Nuns. It is a monumental complex to the south of the city, which contains its own palaces, its ball court, and a low wall. The main building, with an upper temple on the second floor, shows a rich interior decoration of mural painting. A stone for human sacrifices visible from the plaza speaks of the ceremonies associated with this building. And outside, mosaics of late Puk-style stone. The Puk is an architectural style used by the Mayans of certain geographical regions, mainly in the north of the peninsula. Along the route in Chichen Itza, you can see several characteristic elements of this style, such as long-nosed masks, round columns with square capitals, corbel vaults, and stone mosaics on some facades. The courtyards attached to this construction have one-story buildings that could have served as residence for some high-status group. The eastern facade of the so-called annex exhibits a profusion of long-nosed masks with a central character sitting on a throne of feathers and a door in the shape of a monster's mouth, a distant reminiscence of the Cenotes style, another architectural style used by the Mayans of the south of the peninsula of Yucatan, where some of the Itzá came from. The inscription refers to a solar calendar date and mentions several planets. This building is known as a church, a small one-room building that receives its name because of its proximity to the Nuns complex. It shows an exuberant decoration on its upper facade with long-nosed masks, figures of the four bearers of the corners of the sky, and a character integrated into the central mask. Its function is unknown, but it constitutes one of the best examples of architecture close to the Puk style at the site. The city of Chichen Itza was abandoned in the 13th century. It is not known why, but Mayans used to abandon their cities. And most of the Mayan archaeological sites that we visit today are cities that had already been abandoned when the Spanish conquerors arrived. Chichen Itza is one of the most impressive archaeological sites in the world and certainly in Mexico, which is why today it's considered a World Heritage Site and a wonder of the world. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned from this. I hope you enjoyed. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and follow me on Patreon so I can continue to show you these kind of fantastic monuments. I want to thank my friend Matthias from Maya 3D for allowing me to use his 3D model of Chichen Itza to make the animations in this video. In the description box of this video there is a link to his website so you can see all of his work. Thank you so much. See you soon.